Everyone thought David Miller had the perfect life, but what no one saw was that he was already dead inside.
David had already lost his wife, and now his daughter was about to change his life with one impossible decision.
This man didn't want to live anymore until a puppy placed a leash at his feet and refused to let him give up.
What David didn't know was that his dog wasn't just a pet, he was secretly saving his life. First, he lost his wife, and now fate was about to take the one soul who saved him.
At 5:12 a.m., while most of Portland still slept, David Miller was already awake. He sat on the edge of his bed in his quiet Willow Creek home, tying the laces of his running shoes with calm, mechanical precision. His reflection in the mirror showed a man most people would envy. 50 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, arms still carved with quiet strength. Silver threaded through his dark hair, giving him a distinguished edge. He looked like a man who had everything under control. But the mirror only showed the outside. Inside, David felt hollow. 2 years earlier, his entire world had collapsed in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and false hope. His wife, Sarah, the girl he had met at 16 in a high school hallway in Austin, had slipped away from him in less than 6 months. A rare, violent illness. No warning, no mercy. They had built their life brick by brick, college in Boston, careers in Seattle, their dream home in Portland. Every chapter written together. And then, suddenly, David was the only one left holding the pen. Grief didn't arrive like a storm, it came like a slow blackout. He stopped going to work, stopped returning calls, stopped opening the blinds. The award-winning architect who once designed towers of glass and steel now lived among pizza boxes and cold coffee cups. Some days he didn't even recognize the man staring back at him from the mirror. His daughter Chloe tried to reach him from New York. His sister Lisa called from Florida. David ignored them all. He wasn't angry, he was empty. Even walking to the mailbox felt impossible. The neighbors in Willow Creek saw a different man. They saw David jogging alone at dawn, disciplined and distant. They whispered admiration. Wish I had his motivation. They didn't know that every night David slept on only one side of the bed. They didn't know he still set 2 coffee mugs out each morning and then quietly put one back. They didn't know that his heart was stuck in the moment Sarah's hand went cold in his. One Friday evening, David sat in the dark living room surrounded by architectural sketches he hadn't touched in months. The house was so silent it rang in his ears. That was when he finally admitted the truth to himself. He wasn't living, he was only surviving, and he had no idea how to change that. What David didn't know was that help was already boarding a flight, and it wasn't coming in human form. The very next morning, a knock would sound at his door, and behind it was the decision that would either save his life or completely shatter what little remained. The knock came at 9:17 a.m. David wasn't expecting anyone. He almost didn't answer. The sound felt intrusive, like a disturbance in a house that had learned to live in silence. He stared at the door for several seconds, annoyed, then forced himself to stand. When he opened it, his breath caught. Chloe? His daughter stood on the porch, travel bag over one shoulder, eyes tired but determined. She was supposed to be in New York. Surprise, Dad? For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped forward and hugged him tightly, as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. He felt how thin she had become, and she felt how stiff he was. Inside, the house smelled stale. Chloe noticed immediately. The closed curtains, the untouched furniture, the air of abandonment. This wasn't the home she grew up in. This was a museum of grief. They sat at the kitchen table. David poured coffee. Only one mug this time. Chloe studied him carefully. The strong frame was still there, but his eyes looked distant, dulled. "Dad, how bad is it really?" "I'm fine," he lied. She nodded slowly, unconvinced. Then she reached down and unzipped her travel bag. David heard something move, a soft whine. Before he could react, Chloe placed a wriggling bundle of fur onto the kitchen floor. A German Shepherd puppy tumbled out, oversized paws, clumsy body, enormous ears that hadn't decided what direction to point yet. The puppy immediately ran in circles, sliding on the tile. David stared in disbelief. "What is this?" Chloe swallowed. "This is Kaiser." "I don't need a dog." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why you do." David stood up. "Chloe, I can barely manage my own life. I'm not ready for this." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "You're not living, Dad. You're disappearing." The puppy trotted over and sat on David's shoe, as if choosing him. "You don't answer calls. You don't go out. You don't laugh anymore," Chloe said. "I was scared I'd lose you too." The words landed like a punch. "My roommate's allergic. I can't keep him, but I couldn't leave him at a shelter either." David looked down at the puppy. Big brown eyes stared back, unblinking, curious, depending on him already. "I can't do this." Chloe's voice broke. "Then do it for me." Silence stretched between them. Kaiser sneezed. David sighed heavily. "This is a terrible idea." But he didn't say no. And that tiny pause, that moment of surrender, changed the direction of his life, even though he didn't know it yet. David believed the puppy would be a temporary distraction. He had no idea that within days, this small creature would challenge him in a way nothing and no one ever had before.
David realized on the third night that he had made a mistake, a very loud mistake. Kaiser cried at 2:11 a.m., at 3:04 a.m., at 4:30 a.m. By sunrise, David had slept less than 2 hours. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face, while Kaiser attacked the laces of his slippers like they were mortal enemies. "So this is my life now," David muttered. The puppy answered by peeing on the rug. That morning, David seriously considered calling Chloe and telling her to take the dog back. Kaiser chewed furniture, chased shadows, barked at the vacuum like it was a demon. David followed him around the house with paper towels and quiet frustration. He wasn't healing, he was unraveling. By the fourth day, exhaustion mixed with grief in a dangerous way. The house felt smaller than ever. The silence, once familiar, now felt crowded with noise he couldn't control. That afternoon, rain began to fall, a steady Oregon drizzle that blurred the windows. Kaiser paced in restless circles. David ignored him. The puppy sat in front of him and barked once. David didn't move. Kaiser trotted to the hall closet. David barely noticed. Then something landed in his lap, a bright blue leash. David froze. Kaiser stared at him, calm, focused, expectant, not playful, not frantic, serious. "You've got to be kidding me," David whispered. The puppy barked again and nudged the leash closer. David looked at the door, then back at Kaiser. For months, he had barely stepped outside. The world felt too heavy. But something about the dog's steady gaze disturbed him, like he was being challenged. "Fine," David sighed. "1 block." Outside, cool rain touched his face. Kaiser pulled gently down the driveway. 1 block became 2. David's lungs filled with damp air. His chest felt tight but alive. For the first time in months, he noticed the trees. Pink blossoms scattered across wet sidewalks. He had forgotten that seasons still existed. They walked slowly, then a little faster. David felt something strange in his chest. Not pain, movement. That night, for the first time since Sarah's death, David slept without medication. The next morning, Kaiser brought the leash again. David hesitated, then stood up. The walk became a routine, then a faster walk. Then, one morning, without thinking, David broke into a slow jog. His body protested, his lungs burned. Kaiser matched his pace perfectly. When David stopped, bent over, gasping, Kaiser circled back and nudged his hand, not letting him quit. Something inside David cracked open. This wasn't just exercise. This was rescue. He just didn't realize how deep it would go. What David couldn't see yet was that Kaiser wasn't acting on instinct alone. The dog had a secret, one that would soon turn this simple recovery into something far more powerful than David ever imagined.
3 months later, the neighbors started to notice something strange. David Miller wasn't just walking his dog anymore. He was running. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., David and Kaiser flew past the same houses, steady, silent, unstoppable. The man who once barely left his couch now ran 3 miles without stopping. His body was changing. So was his mind. But what no one knew was that Kaiser was doing far more than keeping pace. He was watching closely. David discovered this by accident. One evening, after a brutal day at work, his first week back part-time, David sat alone on the edge of the bed, staring at Sarah's photo on the nightstand. The grief hit without warning. His chest tightened, his vision blurred, the room tilted. A panic attack. He hadn't had one in years. He stood, pacing, struggling for air. Kaiser, who had been asleep in the hallway, suddenly bolted into the room. The dog placed himself directly in front of David, blocking him. Kaiser pressed his body firmly against David's legs and looked up, eyes locked on his. "Buddy, move," David whispered. Kaiser didn't. Instead, he leaned harder into David's body and let out a low, steady breath. David's hands trembled. He grabbed Kaiser's fur without thinking. The warmth, the pressure, the rhythm of the dog's breathing. Slow, steady. David's breathing began to match it. Within seconds, the dizziness faded. The panic loosened its grip. David sank onto the bed, stunned. Kaiser climbed halfway into his lap and stayed there. That night, David searched online. What he discovered made his heart stop. German shepherds used in therapy work are trained to recognize changes in breathing, heart rate, posture, and scent during emotional distress. They are taught something called deep pressure therapy, applying physical weight to calm the nervous system. But Kaiser was untrained. No classes, no certifications. He had done it naturally, instinctively, as if he had been designed for this role. David remembered other moments. Kaiser waking him from nightmares, interrupting spirals of thought, bringing toys when David grew quiet, the leash on the rainy day. This wasn't coincidence. Kaiser wasn't just helping him heal physically, he was protecting him emotionally, from himself. The realization shook David deeply. This dog wasn't a distraction, he was a guardian, a silent sentinel, standing between David and the darkness he nearly fell into. For the first time since Sarah's death, David felt something close to awe. He whispered, "You saved me." Kaiser thumped his tail once, as if agreeing. But fate wasn't finished testing their bond, because weeks later, Kaiser would collapse mid-run, and David would face the terrifying possibility of losing the one being that had brought him back to life.
Just when David finally believed he was healing, fate prepared its cruelest twist yet, one that would force him to confront loss all over again.
It happened on a Tuesday morning, 5:42 a.m. The sky was just beginning to lighten as David and Kaiser ran their usual route through Willow Creek Park. Their footsteps and paws struck the pavement in perfect rhythm, man and dog moving as one. David felt strong, clear-minded, alive. Then Kaiser stumbled. At first, David thought the dog had stepped on a rock, but Kaiser slowed. His stride faltered. "Hey, buddy," David called. 2 more steps. Then Kaiser collapsed. His powerful body hit the ground hard. David's heart slammed into his throat. "Kaiser!" He dropped to his knees, hands shaking as he touched the dog's neck. Still breathing, but shallow, too fast. David's mind flashed back to another hospital room, another body fading beneath his hands. No, 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 not again. People rushed over. Someone called an emergency vet. David cradled Kaiser's head, tears falling freely. He wasn't the broken man he once was, but in that moment, the old terror returned full force. He couldn't lose him, not after everything. At the clinic, the diagnosis stunned him. Congenital heart defect, undetected, time bomb. The vet was gentle but honest. He may have weeks, maybe months. David felt the floor disappear beneath him. He sat in his car afterward, Kaiser resting weakly in the back seat. The same hollow silence returned. History repeating itself. Except this time, David refused to surrender. He adjusted his life around Kaiser's condition. Shorter runs, special diet, medication. He carried him when he tired. Every moment became precious. David stopped waiting for the future. He lived fully in the present. Sunsets on the porch, slow walks, quiet mornings. Kaiser grew weaker, but he never stopped watching David. One evening, as David sat beside him on the floor, he finally understood the full lesson. Love was never about permanence, it was about presence. Weeks later, Kaiser passed peacefully in his sleep, head resting in David's lap. David cried, deeply, honestly, but he did not collapse. He held the pain without being destroyed by it, because Kaiser had already taught him how. Months later, David adopted another shepherd from a rescue. He runs again, designs again, laughs again, not because he forgot, but because he learned to carry love forward. Some beings come into our lives not to stay forever, but to save us in the time we most need it, and that is enough. Sometimes angels don't have wings. They have 4 legs, a leash in their mouth, and a heart big enough to bring us back to life.